My parents worshipped my brother and hated me, but karma and my revenge exposed him as a poisoner, kidnapper, and monster they created. My parents were always harsh on me, but I believed they still loved me until my younger brother Liam was born, because our childhood was so vastly different. My parents used my 8th birthday to honor Liam instead. Not because his birthday coincided, but because he earned it. And don't get me wrong, I loved him. Heck, he was the cutest little bean in the world. But in the back of my mind, I'd constantly wonder, don't I deserve it too? It wasn't until I reached 16 that I first spoke out, because they gave Liam a car for my birthday. He was only 12 years old and had never driven before. When I inquired why they didn't purchase me anything, they replied, Liam's happiness should be enough of a gift for me. I just sighed, and that's when I realized I needed to give up on my dream of having loving parents. And because they didn't give me jack poop my entire childhood, I figured that if I got accepted to college, I could use my lack of parenting to pay 20% of my tuition, because that alone was enough to keep me from feeling like I was drowning in student debt. My mother just burst out laughing and slapped her fist against the table so hard that I thought it might bruise. Son, F off and figure it out, my father responded, smirking. I tried to tell myself it didn't hurt anymore. But it did. I'm not sure why I kept visiting them every holiday season, but I did. I even taught Liam how to drive the car that was supposed to be mine. And every Christmas, I watched as he opened the gifts I never received. But it wasn't until I was 22 that I snapped, since Liam received his college admission letter from the local community college. My parents threw him a party, and I came to show my support. Toward the end, my father tapped his champagne glass to toast. He began by describing Liam as the brilliant son they had never had. Ouch. And just as I was going to leave and head home, they resumed. My father proudly announced that he and my mother would pay for all of his tuition and even buy him a little house so he could live independently and have the whole college experience. My eyes enlarged so widely that I believed my eyelids would split in two. As soon as the visitors started to leave, I gathered my entire family in an upstairs room. What the actual F? I screamed, my phone recording the entire scene in the corner. My mother slapped me across the face. It wasn't forceful, but her ring scratched my cheek, and blood poured out. You can never be happy for anyone, can you? She inquired, her tone caustic. I told you we shouldn't have invited him, my father complained. I looked across to Liam, who was staring at the ground. When they departed, I shut the door and shared the video on every site I could find. And after 2 hours, when no one had seen it, I tagged my entire family in the Instagram comments section. LOL. And I think all that champagne made me sleepy, because I fell asleep on the restroom floor. I awoke at 3 a.m. I awoke with a searing hangover and my parents banging on the door to let them in. We effing hate you, my parents cried in unison. I feigned to be still sleeping and they soon stopped breathing and gave up. The next morning, the family group chat started up. Some were suggesting that I deserved to be hit. Others called me a shame. It was similar to the comment section of TikTok videos featuring alpha male podcast snippets. In any event, everyone agreed it was best to discuss it in person. So, the next morning, we visited Liam's favorite eatery. It included my parents, Liam, both sets of grandparents, and 3 aunts. Within minutes, the talk had switched from discussing the weather to my parents' parenting methods. I didn't say anything, simply let my grandparents on my father's side defend me. And suddenly, after 2 hours of arguing, my parents apologized. My grandparents had threatened to remove them from the will if they did not treat me like their son. My mother apologized through gritted teeth, then gave a robotic explanation of how she should have handled the matter better as the adult. Meanwhile, my father just shrugged his shoulders and muttered, I agree with your mom. It was all very forced. And I believe my grandparents noticed, since they told me I could see them instead of my parents when I came home for the holidays. I felt my face light up when they said that, and I moved in the same day. After all was said and done, they sat me down on the couch and told me something that still makes me grin today. We're still taking your parents out of the will, we just wanted you to get the apology you deserved. For the first time in years, I smiled heartily, and I knew all the misery was over. I thought it was. The next morning, I drove my Margaret to the hospital at high speeds. It turns out that someone had placed laxative powder into her food the day before, and if we had arrived at the hospital 4 hours later, she would not have survived. And I knew Liam was behind it. I sat in the hospital waiting room, my hands still trembling from the drive. The doctors had whisked Margaret to intensive care, and all I could do was pace back and forth, rehearsing everything in my head. The family meeting at Liam's favorite restaurant, the forced apologies, and the laxative powder that nearly killed my grandmother. My phone was buzzing with messages from the family group chat, but I couldn't force myself to check. Not yet. Instead, I was thinking about Liam's actions at the restaurant. How he barely touched his food, how he kept staring at Margaret's plate, and how he offered to refill her water glass 3 times. The sliding doors opened, and my grandfather hurried in, still dressed in his pajamas. His face was pallid, and I could tell he had been crying. He drew me into a tight hug, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. When the doctor eventually appeared, she explained that Margaret's system had been overwhelmed by an excessive amount of laxatives. They had stabilized her, but she was very dehydrated and had a hazardous electrolyte imbalance. If we had waited much longer, her heart could have given out. Grandpa's mouth clenched as he heard this. He turned to me with a face I'd never seen before, sheer wrath combined with determination. He requested me to describe everything that transpired at the restaurant, in detail. I talked him through everything. How Liam had insisted on sitting next Margaret. He'd been particularly attentive, frequently straightening her napkin and shifting her water glass. He went to the bathroom shortly after the food arrived and returned just as everyone began eating. My grandfather listened quietly, his knuckles white as he held the armrest of his chair. When I finished, he gently stood up and took out his phone. He called 3 people, his lawyer, a private investigator he knew from his business days, and the restaurant, requesting that they retain any security tape from yesterday. Family members gradually arrived at the hospital during the next few hours. My parents arrived with Liam looking concerned and perplexed. My mother raced over to me, asking what had occurred in a phony, anxious tone. I just stared at her, remembering how she had hit me just days before. Liam remained near the door, hands in his pockets. He kept checking his phone and looking towards the exit. When our eyes met, he swiftly averted his gaze and began discussing education with one of our aunts. The doctor let us see Margaret in shifts. When it was my time, I discovered her awake but feeble, hooked up to several IVs. She clasped my hand as I sat down near her bed. She mumbled that she had felt uncomfortable shortly after dining at the restaurant. The cramps began on the journey home and worsened throughout the night. She'd been too embarrassed to wake anyone until the pain was excruciating. I stayed with her until the visiting hours ended, then returned to my grandparents' house. Grandpa was already present, seated at the kitchen table with a laptop and various printed paperwork. The private investigator had been busy. He showed me the restaurant's surveillance footage on his laptop. The image quality was poor, but you could definitely see Liam getting up from the table and headed to the restroom. Instead of going inside, he ducked into the kitchen for about 30 seconds before returning to the table. My grandfather had also asked the eatery to inspect their inventory. They were missing a big container of industrial-strength laxative powder used to clean grease traps, the same type that the hospital had discovered in Margaret's system. We both understood what this meant, but proving it would be another story. Liam had been cautious. No direct footage of him removing anything or putting it in the food, simply circumstantial evidence that would not be accepted in any official setting. The next morning, I resolved to approach things differently. Instead of confronting Liam directly, I began paying greater attention to his actions. I concealed a security camera in the hallway outside Margaret's room at home, behind an old smoke detector. I also began chronicling everything. Every time Liam came by, every bizarre question he asked regarding Margaret's health. Every time he offered to assist her with her meds or meals, the pattern became apparent. Within days, Liam would arrive unannounced, always when he assumed I wasn't home. He'd ask extensive questions regarding Margaret's rehabilitation, her medication regimen, and when she would be alone. He would offer to pick up her prescriptions or bring her special foods to aid in her recovery. My folks, understandably, felt I was paranoid when I highlighted Liam's unusual conduct. My mother actually chuckled, saying I was envious because Liam was such a kind grandchild. My father accused me of attempting to turn the family against Liam due to the college financial crisis. But I wasn't the only person who noticed. Grandpa had also been watching, and he had seen enough. He changed all of the locks on the house and set up a robust security system. He also hired a part-time nurse to be with Margaret during the day, closely monitoring everything she ate and drank. That's when the harassing began. Anonymous notes started appearing beneath Margaret's bedroom door. Crude messages told her she was going to die soon, that she should have minded her own business, and that elderly people like her were better off dead. The handwriting was concealed, but the time was questionable. They only emerged on the days Liam had visited. I collected each note and saved it in a folder with the dates and times it was found. Then Margaret's pills started disappearing. First, 1 or 2 tablets, then whole bottles. The nurse reported that someone had entered the medicine cabinet despite the new locks. Liam was conveniently available when these instances occurred, and he was always the first to offer to assist in the search for the lost medications. I realized I needed more definite evidence, so I upgraded the hidden camera in the hallway to one with higher quality and night vision. I also put one in Margaret's room, cleverly disguised in a bookcase so it could view both the door and her bedside table. 3 days later, I had everything I needed. The video captured Liam slipping into the house at 3 a.m., with a key he must have copied before we changed the locks. He walked straight to Margaret's room and stood over her bed for a few minutes, simply watching her sleep. He then took something from his pocket and began mixing it into the water glass on her bedside. I quickly created multiple copies of the footage, one on my laptop, one on an external drive, and one uploaded to a secure cloud service. I was not taking any chances this time. However, when I presented the footage to my parents and other family members, Liam had already planned his defense. He said I deep-faked the video out of envy and was attempting to frame him because I couldn't take him being the favorite child. He was pretty good. He burst out crying, stating he loved Margaret and would never hurt her. He accused me of being mentally ill and needed professional help. He even alleged that I had poisoned Margaret and was now blaming it on him. Some family members trusted him. They pointed out how tech-savvy I was, noting that I'd already made one video attempting to make the family look terrible. My aunt suspected that I was the one who found Margaret unwell and drove her to the hospital. The family was dividing down the middle. Those who had always backed Liam, including my parents, sided with them. Those who saw through the partiality over the years supported me and my grandparents. But Margaret never wavered. Despite her vulnerability, she spoke out at every family meeting, stating that something was wrong with Liam and that she could feel it in her bones. Her voice had weight, yet her weakness led others to disregard her concerns as disorientation caused by her illness. I understood I needed to shift strategies. If confrontation didn't work, perhaps infiltration would. I claimed to have a change of heart. I apologized to Liam privately, explaining that everything had left me nervous and paranoid. I told him I wanted to mend our friendship and that brothers should stick together. Liam was suspicious at first, but his ego prevailed. He'd always enjoyed having power over me, and my apparent obedience contributed to that. He slowly began to relax his guard around me. I started going to see him in the house my parents had bought him. We would hang together, play video games, and talk about college. I pretended to be the supportive elder brother I had always aspired to be, suppressing my disdain whenever he smiled, that fake smile. It took weeks, but Liam ultimately came to trust me enough to leave me alone in his home. That's when I discovered them. The journals, secreted in a lockbox under his bed, describe years of manipulation and plotting. The entries dated back to when he was only 10 years old. Detailed notes on how to manipulate our parents, how to turn them against me, and how to ensure he got everything while I received nothing. He had investigated psychological manipulation techniques, gaslighting schemes, and ways to make someone appear insane. The most recent entries were about Margaret, how she had endangered his position by sticking up for me, and how she needed to be removed from the equation. There were research notes on numerous poisons, their effects, and how to deliver them without being detected. I photographed every single page, ensuring that the images were crisp and understandable. Then I carefully returned everything precisely how I had found it. I couldn't take the diaries quite yet. I needed to convey this evidence in a way that could not be ignored or explained away. I spent the following week preparing. I created many copies of everything, sent some to my grandfather's lawyer, and stored others on safe servers. I also contacted a handwriting specialist to confirm that the diaries were actually Liam's work. When I was ready, I scheduled a family meeting. Everyone was present, including Liam and my parents. I'd asked my granddad to lead the meeting and given him all of the evidence to present. The atmosphere was tense as Grandpa meticulously organized everything. The security footage, the missing drugs, the threatening notes, and finally the diary entries. He had brought printed copies for everyone to view, including the handwriting expert's interpretation. Liam's reaction was swift and severe. He leaped up, yelling that I had planted everything, broken into his home and faked the diaries. He accused me of being infatuated with him and of plotting to wreck his life out of jealousy. But flaws were beginning to appear in his performance. His story kept changing. First, he claimed the journals did not exist. Then he explained that they were private creative writing activities. Then he claimed that I had written them and placed them in his room. My parents attempted to protect him, but even they struggled. The evidence was overwhelming, and Liam's increasingly frantic protestations only made matters worse. When Grandpa showed my mother a diary entry, in which Liam described persuading our parents into purchasing him the car on my 16th birthday, her face turned white. The hush that ensued was deafening. My mother stared at the journal entry, her hands quivering as she read Liam's own words, outlining how he'd persuaded them I didn't deserve a birthday present, how he'd planted the idea that his happiness should suffice for mine. Liam's face has changed from crimson to pale. He grabbed the papers, attempting to pull them away, but my grandfather held them out of reach. That's when Liam turned to our parents, his voice taking on the little boy tone he'd honed over the years. He said I'd been preparing this for months, studying his handwriting and practicing reproducing it. He further stated that I drugged him in order to gain access to his home, that I was dangerous, and that I should be separated from the family. My father stood forward, torn between defending his golden kid and confronting the increasing evidence. He requested to see the genuine journals, not photos. When I explained that I had left them at Liam's residence to prevent allegations of stealing, he saw this as confirmation of my lying. The conference descended into anarchy. My aunts were debating among themselves, with some claiming the evidence was too convenient, and others pointing out Liam's inconsistent arguments. My maternal grandparents, who had always been aloof, suggested that we see a family therapist to work through these misconceptions. But Margaret's voice broke through the background commotion. Despite her infirmity, she explained clearly about the terror she felt when she woke up to discover Liam standing over her bed, how her water tasted funny that night, and the cruel notes that appeared under her door, always in Liam's preferred blue ink. Liam's mask slipped for a brief period. A spark of wrath crossed his face before he calmed down and began crying again. He raced to our mother, putting his face in her shoulder and crying about how I had turned everyone against him. The meeting ended without a resolution. My parents left with Liam, and my mother gave me a look of utter hatred. My aunts left in different automobiles, widening the family gap. Only my paternal grandparents remained. Grandpa's jaw was set with resolve. That night, I was unable to sleep. I kept checking the locks, looking out the windows, and leaping at every sound. Around 2 a.m., I overheard something outside. Through the bedroom window, I noticed Liam's car parked down the street, the engine running. I woke up my grandfather, and we watched as Liam sat in his car for over an hour before driving off. The next morning, we discovered our mailbox had been smashed, with the metal twisted and broken. At 3:47 a.m., the security camera showed Liam doing it with a baseball bat. We filed a police report, but the officer appeared suspicious when we explained our family situation. They deemed it a civil matter in the absence of more clear evidence of genuine harm. They would speak with Liam about the mailbox, but that was all they could do. The harassment intensified in the following days. Dead flowers appeared at our door. Our car's tires were slashed while we were at the supermarket. Someone called in a bogus welfare check for my grandparents, claiming elder abuse. Each incident was meticulously organized to avoid leaving evidence that pointed directly to Liam. He always had an alibi, which our parents would generally give. They'd think he was at home, watching movies or studying for his forthcoming college classes. I began sleeping in shifts with my grandfather, with one of us constantly awake to keep watch. We put more cameras, better locks, and even a panic button that connects straight to the police. But Liam was astute. He understood just how far he could go without violating any legal boundaries. Then came the day Margaret's new medication disappeared. Not just a few tablets, but the whole bottle of her heart medication. The nurse claimed she had locked it in the medicine cabinet that morning, but by the afternoon, it had vanished. We searched the entire house. Margaret may experience another cardiac event if she does not take the tablets. The doctor ordered an emergency prescription, but the pharmacist stated it would take hours to fill. That was when I recognized Liam's car in the pharmacy's parking lot. He was just sitting there, observing and waiting. When I spotted him, he grinned and waved before driving away. I knew he was not going to stop. It wasn't about money or preference anymore. This was all about control, punishing us for daring to challenge him, and he was getting more aggressive. My grandfather and I chose to take matters into our own hands. We recruited a second private investigator, one who specializes in complex family cases. We needed someone who could monitor Liam without being noticed, document his movements, and catch him in the act. Laura, the investigator, was a former police detective who had witnessed numerous family confrontations. She listened to our narrative without passing judgment, considered all of our information, and concluded that Liam was hazardous. She began surveillance immediately. Within a week, Laura had captured Liam following Margaret's nurse home and sitting outside her apartment for hours. She caught him on camera buying massive amounts of over-the-counter drugs that, when combined, might be fatal. She traced him to medical websites, where he looked up chemical interactions under fictitious identities. But the most troubling revelation occurred when she followed him to a meeting with someone she recognized, a well-known drug dealer who specialized in prescription drugs. Liam gave over cash and received a tiny gift in exchange. We wanted to go to the police right away, but Laura recommended caution. We needed to catch him with the chemicals and prove intent to harm. She proposed that we set a trap. The plan was straightforward. We had indicated that Margaret was going in for a normal examination and that she would be alone in the hospital for several hours while tests were performed. In reality, she'd be safe at a friend's house as Laura and another investigator waited in the hospital. Liam took the bait. Laura's cameras captured him entering the hospital with a small bag and headed directly for the room number we had discussed in the family group chat. But when he discovered it was empty, he panicked. He contacted our parents, frantic, and said he had gone to see Margaret but could not find her. My mother called me right away, yelling about how I had endangered Margaret by relocating her without informing anyone. I feigned dumb, claiming she was precisely where we had agreed she would be. The uncertainty saved us time. Laura followed Liam as he searched the hospital, becoming increasingly angry. Finally, he flung the bag into a medical waste can and stormed away. Laura retrieved it right away. Inside were enough narcotics to trigger a lethal overdose. We now have him. Actual proof of intent to injure. Laura had chronicled the full sequence of events, from substance purchase to hospital visit. We took everything to the police. But Liam still had one more card to play. That night, before the cops could arrive, he was at our house with our parents. They requested to be let in, claiming they needed to speak. Despite my better judgment, we opened the door. Liam appeared different. Calm, collected, and almost tranquil. He sat in the living room and declared that he had done a lot of thinking. He wanted to apologize and make things right. He even recommended family counseling. My parents defended him, saying he had come to them in tears, understanding how his actions had broken the family apart. They wanted us to withdraw the police report and address it as a family. My mother actually got on her knees and begged me to give Liam another opportunity. But I saw through it. The way Liam's gaze kept darting to Margaret. The way he positioned himself between her and the door, and the way his hand kept reaching for his pocket. I excused myself to use the restroom and phoned Laura. She was already on her way, having followed Liam's movements. She advised me to keep them talking because cops were on their way. When I returned to the living room, Liam offered to prepare tea for everyone. A peace offering, he explained. He insisted on using Margaret's unique blend, which benefited her heart condition. Red flags went off in my head. I watched him make tea in the kitchen, keeping his body tilted so we couldn't see what he was doing. When he brought out the tray, he made a point of personally handing Margaret her cup, his smile unwavering. Before she could take a sip, I knocked the cup from her grasp. It smashed on the floor, spilling tea everywhere. Liam's mask finally cracked. He lunged at me, yelling that I had wrecked everything. Margaret was meant to pay for inciting our parents against him. That I was supposed to suffer for existing, for being born first, and for forcing him to fight so hard for what should have been his. My father attempted to pull him back, but Liam shoved him away with startling force. He reached into his pocket and brought out a knife, not a large one but sharp enough to cause damage. Laura burst through the door, accompanied by 2 police officers. Liam spun toward them, holding the knife in his hand. Everything froze for a brief moment. Then Liam did something neither of us expected. He chuckled in a chilly, hollow tone that made my skin crawl. He dropped the knife and raised his hands while still laughing. As the policeman cuffed him, he looked straight at me and spoke 5 words that froze me to the bone. "This isn't over, dear brother." The police took Liam away, but the damage to our family was already done. My parents were standing in our living room, looking lost and devastated. The truth about their golden child became undeniably evident. My mother slumped into a chair and sobbed uncontrollably. Not for me or Margaret, but for Liam. She kept insisting on an explanation, that this was not the son she knew. My father stood there, years passing in minutes. Laura got the tea tested. It contained a deadly amount of the painkillers Liam attempted to dispose of in the hospital. If Margaret had drunk even a few sips, she would have died within hours. The police accused Liam with attempted suicide, possession of illicit narcotics, and stalking. Despite the overwhelming evidence, my parents hired the best lawyer they could afford, depleting their funds to defend the son who attempted to kill his own grandma. The family group chat erupted again. Those who defended Liam remained mute, while others expressed shock and disgust. Some accused my parents of enabling him. Others accused me of pushing him to this point. The family had been destroyed beyond repair. But there was a peculiar quiet in our house. Margaret was safe. The incessant worry and paranoia could finally subside. We had won, but it felt hollow. I had utterly lost my parents, and despite everything, it still stung. Grandpa hired protection for the home just in case. Liam was on bail and had to stay at our parents' place while wearing an ankle monitor. But we all knew it wasn't over. The trial would be severe. The family turmoil unfolded in public. I spent the following few days helping Margaret recuperate from her stress. Her heart condition had deteriorated as a result of the continual dread, and she required 24-hour care. I moved into her room and slept on a cot next to her bed. One night, she grasped my hand and squeezed it lightly. She told me she was pleased of me for saving her life. She also stated something that surprised me. She felt terrible for Liam, not for what he'd done, but for who he had become. She believed our parents had created a monster by never telling him no, convincing him that he was entitled to everything, and teaching him that I was less than human, merely an impediment to his happiness. They had deprived him of empathy and basic human decency in their attempt to provide him with everything. The truth of her words struck hard. Liam was not born evil, he was molded and encouraged to be this way. And now everyone was paying the price. Laura continued to serve as our security consultant, assisting us in preparing for the trial. She had unearthed additional evidence. Liam had been planning this for months, possibly years. The journal entries were only the top of the iceberg. She discovered internet posts under false names in which he asked for help on inheritance law and how to make deaths appear natural. She realized that he had communicated with others who had effectively eliminated family members for money. He had been studying, learning, and preparing. The prosecutor was putting up a solid case, but Liam's counsel was effective. They portrayed him as a troubled young guy who snapped under pressure and needed treatment, not prison. They had character witnesses lined up, instructors and family members who had only seen his lovely public face. My parents refused to speak with me, but I heard from other members that they were supporting Liam. They came by every day, bringing him home-cooked food and books. They'd convinced themselves that everything was a misunderstanding that would be sorted up before trial. Then, 3 weeks before the trial was scheduled to begin, Liam disappeared. The ankle monitor was discovered cut off in his bedroom, along with a message that simply said, "I'll be seeing you." My parents were frantic, phoning the police and swearing that he had been kidnapped. However, security footage from their residence showed Liam stepping out the front door at 4 a.m., carrying a backpack and appearing completely calm. The police issued a warrant for Liam's arrest, but he had prepared carefully. He'd emptied his bank accounts days earlier, sold his automobile to a private bidder for cash, and obtained a false ID. Laura discovered that he had been researching nations without extradition treaties for several weeks. My parents, unsurprisingly, blamed me. They arrived at our house yelling that I was to blame for Liam's actions and had destroyed their family. My father attempted to push his way inside, but the security guard that Grandpa had hired stopped him. They left and threatened to sue us for emotional anguish. We spent the next few days on high alert. Every slow-moving car, every unexpected knock on the door, and every unusual noise at night made us nervous. Margaret hardly slept, leaping at shadows. The stress was taking a toll on her already frail health. Then the packages started to arrive. Small boxes with no return address contained images of our house taken from various perspectives. Photos of me in the grocery shop. Views of Margaret from her bedroom window. Each one featured Liam's handwritten statement on the back. "Still watching. You can't hide forever. Family comes first." Laura traced the packages to various post offices throughout the state. Liam was moving around, being mobile, but he was also becoming sloppy. One of the images revealed a reflection in a car window, revealing a partial license plate that Laura's connections were able to locate. Melissa, the car's owner, reported it stolen a week earlier. Laura investigated deeper and discovered that Melissa had been in contact with Liam via a dating app. She'd undoubtedly handed him the automobile freely, another person captivated by his actions. We were getting close to locating him when calamity struck. I had gone out to pick up Margaret's medicine, leaving her with the nurse and security guard. I returned an hour later, and the front door was wide open. The security officer lay asleep on the lawn. The nurse was confined in the bathroom, and Margaret was gone. My palms shook as I dialed 911. The house was in disarray with furniture overturned and Margaret's pills thrown across the floor. There were traces of a scuffle in her room, with her emergency alarm buttons crushed to bits. The police arrived quickly, followed by Laura and her squad. They discovered chloroform residue on a cloth in the garden, as well as tire tracks from a vehicle other than the stolen automobile. Liam had assistance this time. My telephone rang. Unknown number. I responded on speaker so that the police could hear. Liam's voice was different now. There will be no more playing or acting like a small boy. Only cold calculation. He assured me that Margaret was secure for the time being, but this could change. He wanted the entire inheritance money that he was entitled to. And he wanted me to publicly acknowledge that I had faked all of the evidence against him. The cops attempted to track the call, but he was using a burner phone. He gave me 24 hours to collect the money and record the video confession. Then he hung up. Those were the longest 24 hours of my life. The police established a command center in our living room. The FBI became engaged because it was now a kidnapping case. My parents arrived asking to be invited while swearing Liam would not injure anyone. Laura worked her contacts while the official investigation was ongoing. She had a theory. Liam couldn't do it alone. Someone was assisting him, someone with experience. She began digging into the folks Liam had been talking to online regarding inheritance plans. The breakthrough occurred from an unexpected source. One of my aunts, who had been solidly on Liam's side, called me crying. She had received a call from Liam requesting money and threatening to harm Margaret if she did not cooperate. Her disguise had finally loosened. She had recorded the call. In the background we could hear a woman's voice telling Liam to hurry. Laura improved the audio and processed it with speech recognition. Laura was a well-known con artist who targeted the elderly. With this clue, the FBI investigated their likely whereabouts. Laura possessed a cabin 3 hours north, which she received from one of her victims. It was remote, ideal for hiding someone. The rescue operation was scheduled at morning. I wanted to go, but the FBI wouldn't let me. So I waited at home with Grandpa, both of us pacing and unable to eat or relax. The call arrived at 7:23 a.m. They had discovered Margaret. She was dehydrated and afraid, but otherwise okay. Liam and Laura had been apprehended following a brief attempt to escape. The cabin was filled with evidence, more journals, detailed plans for other family members they intended to target, and studies on untraceable poisons. When I watched Margaret being wheeled into the hospital, I broke down in tears. She was pale and wobbly, but she managed a little grin when she spotted me. She told me Liam had complained for hours about how unfair life had been to him, how he deserved everything, and how I had stolen his birthright by being born first. Laura, it turned out, had been mentoring Liam for several months. She discovered him on the forums where he had inquired about inheritance law. She'd identified an easy target, a young man with wealthy grandparents and a strong sense of entitlement. She'd taught him everything and intended to split the money after Margaret was gone. The trial date was moved up. Liam attempted to claim Laura had exploited him, and that he was also a victim. But the evidence was overwhelming. His writings, the recordings, and the testimony of several witnesses. Even my parents couldn't dispute it after hearing recordings of Liam coldly discussing how to make Margaret's death appear normal. My parents' hearts broke on the day Liam was condemned. My mother greeted me outside the courthouse, looking as if she had aged 20 years. She attempted to apologize, but the words would not come. My father just stood there, shoulders drooping, realizing what their favoritism had created. I wanted to forgive them. Part of me still wanted their affection and approval. But Margaret's words echoed in my head. They had manufactured this situation. They'd taught Liam that I was less than human, and that he deserved everything. Their weeping did not erase 22 years of neglect. Liam got 25 years. Laura received 30 because of her earlier transgressions. As they dragged him away, Liam took one last look at me. There is no more fury or threat, only emptiness. He had lost everything by attempting to grab what was never truly his. The family gradually began to recover, but it would never be the same. Some family apologized for not realizing the reality sooner. Others stayed away, ashamed of their involvement in aiding Liam. The family conversation was disbanded. Holiday gatherings became smaller and quieter affairs. My parents attempted to restore their relationship with me, but I kept them at arm's length. They had shown me who they were, and I could not forget. They ended up relocating to another state, beginning over with no one knowing their story. I heard they were volunteering with disturbed adolescents now, attempting to atone in their own way. Grandpa and Margaret have formally adopted me. At 23, it may have been stupid, but it meant everything. For the first time in my life, my parents selected me, putting me first. They threatened to remove my parents' inheritance, which became a trust fund for my future. My grandparents helped me graduate college debt-free. I got a job I loved and began treatment to deal with everything that had transpired. I gradually created the life I had always desired, one in which I was respected and mattered. Margaret's health improved once the tension was relieved. She survived another 6 years, dying quietly in her sleep at 91. At her funeral, I talked about her strength and wisdom, and how she had saved me just as much as I had saved her. Grandpa and I hugged as we bid our goodbyes to the woman who had taught me what real family was. The house felt empty without her, but her presence remained in every room. Grandpa and I kept each other company, 2 generations united by common trauma and affection. He taught me his business, preparing me to take over someday. We never talked about Liam. but I'd see him glancing at old family photos with a grief I understood all too well. Years later, I received a letter from Liam in prison. He wrote about seeking therapy and ultimately recognizing what he had done. He did not seek for forgiveness. He only wanted me to know he was trying to improve. I never replied. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. Life moves on. I found someone who understood my delicate relationship with family. We created our own customs, definitions of love, and loyalty. When we had children, I made sure they knew they were equally appreciated and valued. The circle of favoritism ended with me. Sometimes I pass past my parents' former house, which has been sold to strangers. I recall the youngster who just wanted to be loved and hoped things would improve. That youngster deserved better, yet he persevered. He discovered his true family and learned that blood does not always equal affection. Grandpa is still with me, albeit he is slowing down lately. We care for each other as a family should. Every Sunday we go to Margaret's grave together, bringing fresh flowers and updates on our lives. I tell her about my children, my profession, and the normal life I've created out of the ashes of our family's demise. Liam is scheduled for release in a few years. Given the gravity of his offenses, my lawyer says he will almost certainly be denied. Part of me hopes he has truly changed. Prison has given him boundaries that our parents never did. However, just in case, I have established an amazing security system. Because family trauma never truly goes away. You simply learn to live with it and construct something greater despite it. Every holiday, birthday, and family milestone bears the weight of what was and could have been. But I'm okay now. Really okay. I have the family I selected, the life I created, and the love I deserved. And sometimes the best retribution is simply living well in the face of all they tried to take away from you. The video I released years ago still circulates on occasion, serving as a viral reminder of how swiftly a family can shatter. People contacted me for updates, unable to believe it was true. I never respond. Even if the plot continues, that chapter is no longer open. Because that is what survival looks like. Not a dramatic conclusion, just a peaceful continuing. Getting up every day and deciding to be better than your past experiences. Creating love where there was disregard. Creating a family where there was only blood. And understanding that sometimes the best gift your parents can offer you is teaching you who you should not become.